I got to a place of this self-awareness journey by a very traumatic place. I mean, I don't want that level of trauma on anyone, right? And I think a lot of my coaching is that I don't want to say I want to save people from trauma, because people are going to deal with what they're going to deal with.
Right, right.
But what I do want to do is I want people to have the tools that if trauma shows up in their life, they can show up. Who they are can show up instead of a label, a different way of showing up.
Hello, and welcome to episode 105 of the Living and Leading with Emotional Intelligence podcast. I'm your host, Brittney-Nichole. Today's guest is William Brown. William is a self-awareness coach, speaker, and author who helps solopreneurs and future entrepreneurs gain an actionable awareness of themselves so that they can show up authentically in their work, relationship, and for themselves. And that is what's so important. We have to realize that awareness, emotional intelligence, it's not just about leadership, it's about life, and it's about connection. And I think William has a wonderful story to share about how he got into this space of self-awareness and emotional intelligence. So without further ado, here is William Brown. William, it is a pleasure to have you on the Living and Leading with Emotional Intelligence podcast. I would love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners so they can get to know you a bit better, and we'll go from there. Who is William Brown?
Well, thank you. It's definitely an honor and privilege to be here. You know, I am William Brown. It's especially with the self-discovery journey. I'm trying to figure out who William Brown is too. So I'm gonna within that I'm gonna try to introduce myself. You know, I am a clarity coach, and that basically spotlights self-awareness, because I believe in order for us to get clear in our life and how we want to show up, it's not just be clear about what we're doing, it's how we're being. And so for me as a clarity coach, I invite people to just look at how they're showing up in their work and for themselves and in their relationships. I'm a father of 4 adult children. I've been married for 30 years. And I'm just excited about discovering myself. And so the more that I can wake up every day and learn something new about myself, it's a good day. So That's who I am.
That's such a wonderful thing to discover yourself every day, right? Something new can be scary sometimes.
Absolutely. It's like, oh, geez, wow.
Didn't know that was there. Where have you been for a while, right? But yeah, I mean, and the work you're doing is amazing, and it definitely comes from the heart. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show, because I picked that up from our conversation together. And I would love for you to kind of share with the listeners and viewers your personal story for how you got into emotional intelligence and more specifically awareness, because that's where it begins. That's the foundation.
Yeah, it's about 7, almost 8 years ago now. If you talk to me, I would say, you know, I was happily married. You know, I was a good business owner. Had, you know, amazing kids, and, you know, my life, you know, living a dream, that. And I was all of those things until I wasn't, right? I was a successful businessman until I wasn't. You know, I was happily married until I wasn't. I was a great dad until I wasn't. And it's like during that time when I wasn't, when I became aware that I wasn't, and I was looking around, I asked myself the question, who am I? If I'm not all of those things that I have been working so hard to be, who am I? And that's when my acknowledgement to my self-discovery journey kind of like gotten the place. And I realized that there were a number of things, especially when it comes to emotional intelligence, is that there was a lot of emotions that I didn't allow myself to experience. It's like I would say when I was mad, I would say, you know what, I'm mad. And that just leave it right there. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't, I would acknowledge that I had that emotion and that was the extent of it. Because growing up, emotions were scary. Emotions were dangerous. They were abusive. They were, I mean, because there was when I was in a room as a child and there was a lot of emotions, anything could pop off. And so what I learned as a 7-year-old, and I realized that sometimes, I was allowing the 7-year-old to dictate how the adult lived, right? But what I learned back then is emotions, too many emotions, bad, kind of get them in control. And so the fact that I became aware of my emotions and started acknowledging my emotions, that's when I really started living. That's when I was able to talk to my kids and tell them that I was scared or that I was concerned, and I was afraid, talking to my wife and telling her that I was afraid about something. And I don't want to say I have come to terms with saying I'm okay with this, meaning that it's not a resignation that of it, but it is. There's a lot of things that I wasn't okay with that I would kind of try to manipulate and kind of do that. The more that I accept the reality of things or what's present, the more that I am able to make different choices, if that makes sense. So when I say I'm okay with this, I'm acknowledging what's in front, I'm acknowledging something. So now if now I'm aware that I'm angry, or now that I'm aware that I feel this certain way, I can either be with that or make some different choices or and I think that's where the intelligence can come. So it is really the fact that there were so many years that I wasn't present to my emotions. I wasn't even present to my beliefs and my desires. There was just a way that I'm a dad, I'm a business owner, I'm a husband, and I'm just doing dad, business owner, husband things, right? Where William shows up in all of that, it really doesn't matter. I just need to make sure that all of those other roles are being taken care of. And the more that I really embrace that I'm a human being and experiencing all of these emotions and feelings and dreams, that's okay, and then I can be present with people.
So beautifully said. And this is so for those who are listening or watching, I would say your mind is probably just blown as mine, because it's such a beautiful story that I'm sure resonates with so many people. And I think that's what makes it so beautiful, is that human side that others can relate to. Because I think so many of us, again, are telling ourselves, I'm happy, I'm successful, I'm confident, I'm this, I'm that, because we've been told that that's what we need to be
Right.
in this world. And if we're not, then we're broken. Something is wrong with us. So we don't take the time to look inward and ask ourselves, but what am I really experiencing? Right. Am I happy? Right. Am I confident? Am I only happy when I have this? Or is it something that I embrace and embody every day. I'm content with who I am, and I can shift with the tide.
Right.
Like you came to that realization.
Yeah. I mean, it was, look, the details of, my marriage was, at first I would say it was on, on life support, right?
Mm.
No, my marriage was in hospice. I mean, there
Wow.
were people saying that it's over and it's okay, you're not a failure. And my business, I lost over $500,000,
Wow.
and so it's just like, so I had a therapist tell me, when I told her, I was like, oh, my world is falling apart, and she says, no, it's not falling apart, it just feels that way. And I just looked at her like, what are you, I can show you, I can give you evidence, right? It's not just a feeling, right?
I ate
Um,
SpaghettiOs last night for dinner. You can't tell me that my world's not falling apart.
right, but the more that I've been on this journey, the more that it was feeling
Yeah.
the more that I got connected to my feelings and how I can feel like things are falling apart. And that's not, there are still things that are together.
Mm-hmm.
There are still things that I can look at. I asked a question probably a couple months ago. It was like for myself, it was in my journal, and I asked some of my clients, it's like, can you be happy and sad at the same time? Because there was something that happened, and it was just odd. I was like, yeah, but it's like, it's terrible, right? It's like in the same moment. And it's like the more that I embrace that I can be both, I can be happy and sad. I can,
Mm-hmm.
the more that I can embrace my life, embrace my humanity.
Yeah.
And it's like you were saying, that there was this, I'm either happy or sad,
Right.
that's it, and if I'm happy right now, I got to push away any other feelings of anything else because I'm happy, damn it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I was doing is that I was not allowing my life to kind of let me know in other areas, what was going on in other areas of my life.
Right.
And it's like, you talk about, technology, and, I use the analogy of how many alerts that, notifications that we ignore, right? And it's like our emotions and our feelings are just alerts. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
this is something happened, and this is how you feel about it. And it's like, are you going to deny that?
Right. I don't want to deal with this right now. I don't want to
Right.
see who's knocking on my door or,
Right.
blowing up my phone. That can wait.
Right. And
Yeah.
when you can only do that so much with your emotions, right?
Exactly.
And that's where my life was. And sometimes it shows up that way, that I can recognize the thing about my awareness now that I am grateful for is that, when I have those moments of, potentially denying my emotions, I'll ask myself, okay, is this what we're going to do? Are we going to, because you still have a choice here.
Yeah. That internal dialogue.
Right. And it's like, sometimes it's like, I'm just going to be mad right now. It's like, okay, that's what we're doing, right? We're just going to be mad. Good.
Yeah.
You made the decision. Let's go with it. Right.
It's like being the parent to yourself.
Right. And that's, and I had, another coach friend of me saying, that so many times we think people are crazy who talk to themselves. And she was like, I think you're crazy if you don't talk to yourself. It's like, because the more that we are, for me, the more that I am willing to just touch base with myself, to how I'm showing up, and say, is this what we're doing? Is this how it's going? If this, then I can get to the power of choice. I can get to really exercise that. Most of the times in my life before, the last 7 years, there were so many things that I would say, I have to do this. or this is just the way it is. I was just resigned that, this is how I had to show up in my life. And so I had no say. I had no say in my life, but I convinced myself that I created this life. And then it was like, I created a life that I have no say in. That's a horrible life to live. That's a horrible life to live.
It's a little bit conflicting, right?
Right. Right.
A little bit.
And it's like, how many people do that? Because we just turn over our basically our choice to other people, to someone else. And look, and there's, I love my wife. I've been married for 30 years. She has say in my life. But at the end of the day, I get to say. And I think the more that I get aware of what I call an actionable awareness of self, is that because I have a tendency that I've caught for myself where, I do a lot of navel gazing, right? It's like, okay, let me kind of figure this out and just put the world on pause. The world doesn't pause, right?
No, it doesn't.
And it's like, so how can I have an awareness of myself and stay active, stay in the world? Yeah. Maybe slow some things down, maybe kind of like, what? I need a time out. I need to take a walk. Let's maybe just a deep breath. I've noticed for myself, I have a meditation practice, but every once in a while when I'm like dealing with something, there will be a deep breath. And it's like, I don't know where that breath came from, but I guess I needed it.
Yes, I can totally relate to that. I do the same thing. I'll just be sitting there and and you just let it out. And if my husband walks by when I happen to do that, he's like, "Are you okay? Is everything?" Yeah, I'm good. I just,
yep, pretty good.
It's an energy release, and it happens. It's kind of like a yawn. It's your body's way of taking care of what it needs to take care of.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. Oh. So we're talking a little bit before we hit the record button, and we're both still learning, even though we practice this on a daily basis. We both have our own challenges. Right. And I was telling you some of my challenges is letting go of controlling what other people think, especially about me. And it's not that I'm not confident in who I am, but I don't like people for me, it's like, I don't like you getting away with the wrong information.
Right.
So then I have to ask myself, are you tricking yourself into thinking that you're 100% confident in who you are? Because if I am 100% confident in who I am, would it really bother me what other people say?
Right. That's definitely that's an interesting question in a sense, because there is some sense that we learn about. Okay, so I'll say it this way. I believe that we're on this self-discovery journey alone with others, right? So the only person who really knows me is me. Other people get a glimpse of me when I, show up as myself. But at the same time, other people become that mirror, let us see our reflection, let us see us showing up or how we're showing up.
Right.
And it's like, so for me, sometimes it's like, is this a reflection or is this a projection?
Right.
And the more that I know about myself, the more that I feel confident with myself, and I think the same thing, for you, the more that you can see, oh, this is a reflection. And this is an area that I've seen of myself before, or this is something that I've been working on, or this is something, or this is a projection. This has nothing to do with me, right? This is, and what we do, and my challenge, and I think it's something that you're speaking to, what we do when we get projected on, right? Without our permission. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
what the hell, right? How dare you, right? And how dare you say that's me? And it's like, and sometimes I wonder if people really know that it's not us, but they just,
Right.
are trying to
Rattle us to
right.
get some satisfaction.
Right.
I used to be that person though. So I
Mm,
used to be the person that would intentionally rattle others
mm,
because I was in such misery
mm,
and anguish that I wanted to see other people just as miserable as I was.
right.
And I knew what I
Oh
was
boy.
doing. I wouldn't admit it, but I knew.
Right.
And it would give me great pleasure to see them squirm, to see them get irritated and frustrated, which is why when people project onto me or try to rattle my cage, whichever it may be, intentionally or unintentionally, I try not to react in front of them. But I
Right.
can't help but have that internal narrative of, again, like you said, how dare they? They don't know
Mhm.
me. How could it's like someone telling me that my skin is blue? And it's like,
Right.
what? Like, clearly my skin's not blue. Where are you
Right.
come? But it's just, I get irritated with ignorance. And to
Mm,
me, that is some form of ignorance in my mind
right.
because it's their narrow perspective
Right.
that frustrates me.
Yeah. You know what? There's, a lot of my conversations are in the self-help industry space, right? So it's in the industry of self-help, right? There's an industry of self-care, right? There's
Yeah.
self-care, and there's an industry of it, but I the problem that I have with the industry is, my belief is that it has nothing to do with you learning more about yourself, but basically being a better label, what I call labels, basically showing up a different way, the different ways that we show up. And the more that frustrated and disappointed and angry. So I have a nice guy label. So I'm always looking for nice words to say when people are just being a jerk, right? It's like, I can't just say, oh, you're being a jerk. It's like, well, maybe they don't understand, right? Maybe they're just distracted. But I think the more that we are willing to allow our understanding of ourselves to be expanded, but at the same time, not let people add things on to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, because I know that, because look, I look for, learning something new about myself every day. Like I said, there are areas that I'm not aware of, but as soon as they show up, I kind of feel it here, and right, my core is like, oh yeah, that's me. That, I'm okay with that.
Right.
But I am not, and I think that you were saying, I'm not going to let people just add stuff to me, right?
Right. You can show me, open my
Right,
eyes to things that I can't see.
right. But
And
you're not
that
going to add
helps
stuff on,
me
right?
versus exactly. I totally see where you're going with that. For example, if I interrupt people a lot, but I'm not aware of that, and someone brings that to my attention, then that is showing something that I'm not aware of, a part of
Right,
me.
right,
But if they say that they throw some unpleasant words at me,
right,
it's like, no, I'm not okay with that because now that's a label that is a constant, right? If
right,
they were to say you're a bitch,
right,
like that's a constant label, not you're acting like in
right,
this moment you are. No.
right, right. It reminded me of a parenting story. I don't know if you have kids or not,
Not
but
yet, no.
right, the teenage years, right? Fun. Um, I I had some a time where I had to correct one of my daughters. She was 17 at the time, and she said to me, you need to stop acting like an ass. And I was like, did you just call me an ass? She said, no, you're acting like it. And I was like, well, okay, wait a second. You're gonna, I was like, I don't know what to do with this, because you just need to go to your room. Because I mean, if I would even thought that when I was growing up, I wouldn't be alive, right?
Right, you'd be on the floor.
right, and so it was like, there are so many ways that people will try to, or we will just hear, like if someone says, oh, you're a bitch, or you're a jerk, even if they say you're acting like this, all we hear is that I am that.
Right.
And it's like, there are so many times that, and I'm getting the awareness of this for myself, that there are so many times that I put that I am this. It's like, anytime I make a mistake, it's not I made a mistake, I am a mistake. And it's like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, stop adding on to that. There is so many, and then I want to fight. Then I'm mad, or then I'm doing all this other kind of stuff, and I'm creating all these emotions with the information, the wrong information, how I heard it differently. And it's like, well, why did I hear it that way?
Yeah.
Why did I, what is going on? And I think most of the times, I don't want to say most of the times, but some of the times when I get the opportunity, when someone, and I can see when someone's trying to add something onto me, I will say, that's interesting. How are you able to see that? I've never saw that in myself. What did I say? What did I do to cause you to see that? And most of the times when people are projecting, they can't think of anything,
exactly.
Yeah. And, and they're just very,
they start pulling for things.
Elementary, right. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, all right, this has nothing to do with your interactions with me. This is just something that you felt you needed to say in this moment for whatever reason. Maybe I'm getting too close to something with you, or something. Maybe you're dealing with something. But it's really interesting that for me, most of my challenges with awareness and my emotions is about how people will respond to me, how people will relate to me if I acknowledge an awareness or an emotion or something. Me dealing with my emotions or me dealing with my awareness, it's okay, right? It's like, okay, this is how I'm showing up, or this is this, and I'm kind of like dealing with that. But the more that I'm concerned how my kids will think if dad is, this way, if I said this, if I'm crying, what people will think of me, that, and it's like, so that's why most of the times most of my emotions are fully expressed not around other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to get to a point where I can I don't want to say, it's not even hide emotions, but not, but be so concerned that if I move to tears, I move to tears. It doesn't matter for me where I move to tears.
Unapologetically.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's that it's like, I want to, like I said, on this self-discovery journey with others, I want to recognize the others. But at the same time, it's like, I want to ignore them, and I want to kind of be aware of how they're showing up.
Yeah, because we do live in that society where we're so conditioned, right? For what is appropriate, when it's appropriate,
right?
All of these things. And so, like you're saying, there's a fine line between being unapologetically you and being accepted in society.
Right.
It's such a weird balancing act, because while people say they want people to be more vulnerable and authentic,
right,
if you were to just, like you said, react to something in a setting where that's not seen as appropriate, then they're going to start attaching labels onto you, and that could affect your credibility and
Right.
so many things. And I think that's where communication really comes into play when we talk about awareness and emotional intelligence, is being able to communicate that to others whenever we're having an emotion and
Mm-hmm.
preparing them for, I'm okay. I just need to feel this right now. This is what I'm
Right.
feeling. And I think that helps to get rid of that awkward air sometimes, because
Right.
they don't know what's going on all the time. Nobody can get
Right.
into our heads. So having that
Um,
dialogue.
yeah, it's, my simple definition of communication is a brave sender and a prepared and willing receiver. And I think most of the time we we don't fully communicate because one, we're not being brave, right?
Uh-huh.
Or the receiver is not prepared or willing. And so how do we prepare someone to listen? It's just, to say, sometimes it's like, honey, I have something important to say. I would really love your undivided attention. That's
Right.
Then there's a choice, right?
Right.
I've been married for 30 years. So there are some years where you would just walk in a room and start talking. And I don't, and people just listen, right? And just wonder why there was like miscommunication all over the place because I didn't prepare them for
Right.
anything I had to say.
Right.
And it's like really be okay with being present to a situation and the appropriate emotions
Mm-hmm.
that will come to that. If someone says something disappointing or scary or sad or something, there's an appropriate emotion to that. And many times for myself, I don't know if it's my guy label or something, I try to like, all right, that's appropriate for me to cry right now, but not in this role. And it's like the more that I'm just William just shows up. And sometimes William cries, or does something or looks confused, right? I mean, there are things like that I the emotion or I don't know if confusion is an emotion, but it feels like
I feel like it. I mean, confusion definitely feels like an emotion to me too.
right,
Maybe it's a medley of emotions, but I
right.
don't know what that would be. But yes.
I know sometimes when I'm confused, I get angry, right? But so anger comes after that. But there were just ways that I would conceal what I was thinking, how I was feeling, how was something, and it felt like I couldn't get what I needed within that communication because I was so busy concealing what I was feeling. I wasn't giving people the appropriate, necessary signals of how I was processing the information that was around me, and then I was upset that I didn't get to understand. And it's like, how many times does that happen in my communication?
Right. So I call that Swiss cheese communication.
Oh,
Communication with
okay.
holes in it. And I don't know if you noticed, but I got super excited when you said, I don't believe you used the term sender. I think you said sender and receiver. And so in my book, I talk about communication and I label it as the messenger and the receiver instead of the person doing the talking and person listening, because that's what you're doing. You're receiving that information or you're not. Just because you have ears and inputs coming in doesn't mean that it's being received appropriately. And then you've got to think about all of those filters that it goes through before that person receives the information. Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very complicated emotional intelligence, awareness. It's complex. And anyone who says that it's simple just doesn't have a deep level of understanding. People say, oh, it's just simple. It's simple to be kind. It's simple to be, either you have a very high level of emotional intelligence and you're not scarred from life,
Right.
or you're just not getting it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because it's complex.
I totally get that. And I thank you for the messenger term, because I think that resonates more to me than sender. Because what I got for myself, the more that I see that I am sharing a message, and that an important message, important to me, important to the person, the receiver, then there is a care, right? Then there is patience. Then there are all of those other things that that comes along with it. And I find myself, in our society of communication, very distressed with how many times that people really don't care if you get it or not. I don't, and it's like, and just say stuff. It's like, let's talk to each other.
Dialogue.
Like, right. Yeah. That it's important. And I think with the thing that scared me about, the term emotional intelligence is that, because I'm new at this emotions thing, feeling all the feels. And it's like, because there's a part of me, I took on the label of being smart. I want to be smart. I have to be smart. I have to, and I have to be right. And it's like, try to get your emotions right. It's like, they just show up, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and it's like, so where is the intelligence? And it's like, for me, the intelligence is, I don't say the aftermath, but how people around respond and relate to that. And it's like, because I don't want my anger or my disappointment or my fears to just like fall on people, right? I want to have some sense of intelligence that they can deal with it. They can understand, they can help me through it. There is a processing, of it. And I think the more that I am not managing my emotions, but, and I don't know if I have the language for this, maybe you can help me with this, is manage the relating of it, or managing the fallout. I don't know why I keep on, fallout just keeps on coming, but it's like, once the emotions show up, because like I said, most of the time they just show up, and it's like, okay, all right, this is this is what's going on. And I go through the inquiry. It's like, okay, why am I afraid right now? Right? Why am I this right now? What's going on right now? And then from that, the more that I'm willing to give voice to my emotions, the more that I am willing to allow them to just be. Because they are, I am not my emotions, right? But my emotions are not against me. They're telling you, mess me up. Right.
Yeah. They're informing you about either yourself or your environment or your experience or your thoughts. Right. Like you said before, they're information. They're meant to tell us something about ourselves.
And it's so there's so many times in the struggles that we have when we get confronted by someone. I don't know. Sometimes I don't know if it's triggered or something. I use confronted because, one, when I confront things, when I'm confronted by things, then I can get to choice, right? When I'm triggered by things, there's no choice there. I am going to, for me, a trigger happens when it's something that I'm ignoring, and now it's like, I'm triggered by, this is something I've put this down in a place where I don't need to deal with this, anymore. And so it's not in my awareness anymore. And you just activated this, but when I'm confronted by something, then it allows me to really say, okay, is this me? Am I going to do I want to deal with this? Do I want to respond to how, and then
how am I going to do it? Yeah.
Right.
It's a choice. Yeah.
And it can go from there. And I think that's how my, sometimes my wife still tells me that, you're not reading the room right now, and it's like, she's like, for all of your awareness, I don't think you're aware of what's going on right now, mister. It's like, okay. So, I mean, but there is the more that I have, my wife and other people to say when I missed the mark.
Yeah.
And I'm, and I'm confronted by that. And it's like, you're right. I made an assumption that this is what that was. Yeah. And this is not the case. And thank you.
Yeah. That's like a coach, right? You think of coaches in sports. They provide you that insight when you maybe have missed the mark or didn't run a play correctly, but they're not doing it out of malice. They're doing it to help you refine your skills, become aware of that. So the next time you're confronted with that situation, you're better prepared on how to handle it in a way. And that's why people review plays. And it's funny that I'm talking about sports because I don't watch sports, but I feel like it's a good analogy. And in that same sense, watching a play and you're able to take that third person perspective and see everything that's going on. I do the same thing with journaling, recording things. Whenever I'm upset, I used to record myself and I would listen to it again. And it's like, wow, that's how I'm talking about this person or about me or about the situation. And it really brought to light the core issues there, listening to the words that I was using, because we're not always conscious of how we say things and how we react. And there have been times where I've been on a conversation, whether it's a podcast or a phone call, and especially podcast, I'll watch it and I'll say, man, I really missed the mark. I should have asked. There was an opportunity to ask a great question and I totally overlooked that.
Right. It's almost the, there's something that I was said, people said to me when I was a little kid, that you're too smart for your own good, right? And it's like, sometimes awareness shows up that way. Sometimes we can be so aware, we're unaware. We kind of like step over because I find myself, I want to be so aware and so present in everything. And there's like shit happening that because it's not a part of my view. There, it's the same thing with listening. There's a lot of things that, I'm working on a challenge right now, and it's called your sense of awareness, and go through our, 5 senses. And I can remember that there are so many conversations that I didn't have the listening for, 7 years ago. I mean, people could have been saying, oh yeah, you need to do this. And they probably said self-awareness and they thought, but I had no listening for it, because my focus was on, I'm creating this wonderful life and, everything is great. So it's like, I look in a box, everything looks great. It's in a box, and just keep going. And I think sometimes when we're so aware, we're so present, when we're present, I find myself kind of not seeing some things, not being aware, not having, because I can only see what I see. So it seems like double talk.
Well, it's like a lens. You focus on something. And if you're zooming in and focusing on that one thing, everything else is going to be blurred. You have to zoom out and zoom back in. It's kind of like a constant shift of perspective, if you will.
Right. And so how can we So here's a question that's coming up for me. How can we stay focused and zoom out, unfocused to really, there are sometimes people, I've had people say, I don't listen to what people say, I listen to what they don't say. It's like, well, you know what? You can do that, but listen to what they're saying too, because, because that can kind of put some, context to everything.
Yeah.
And so for me, the inquiry of being focused or changing a sense of focus to kind of really kind of get connected to myself, because, and that's, like I said, that's the journey of the sense of awareness,
Right.
is that because there is sometimes that where I get tripped up is that I'll see something and it's like, in my mind, that's what it is, period. I'm aware, that's what I saw. I didn't listen. That feeling that came over me that says, this doesn't feel right. I ignored that,
Yeah.
And do that. But the more that I'm able to bring as many senses in alignment, then I can get that. I think what you were speaking to, of that in focus and out of focus type of thing.
Yeah. So
kind of awareness.
My friend Brian Cunningham wrote a book called AQ, The Awareness Quotient.
Okay.
And he talks about 4 levels of awareness. There's internal, which is being aware of yourself. There's external, your outside world, the cues that other people are giving you, society, etc. And then integrative awareness is kind of the next step, where you're able to merge that internal and external awareness and combine them, which is what I think you're looking for.
Right.
And then there's that 4th level, which is just a deeper life purpose, a connection to all that is, right? And we can kind of go in and out of these different levels of awareness. And I think that kind of sounds like what you're experiencing, right? Like sometimes you're super hyper aware externally of what other people are saying, but then you miss that intuition that your gut is telling you, and don't listen to that. And you need to like find that good space of integration.
Right. The more that I just sit back and trust my intuition and use that language of intuition, the more that I'm okay with how things land out. Yeah. And it's like, even sometimes when it doesn't go the exact way that I think it should, it's still okay, because the more that I get in condition, I condition myself to trust myself, the long-term benefits of it.
Oh yeah.
And because there has been, like, earlier on in this, in my journey of self-awareness and self-discovery, I didn't know who I was. It's like from day to day, it was almost how I labeled it. It's like I wasn't having an identity crisis. My identity was in crisis. And so the essence of who I thought I needed to be was in crisis. And so it's like, dude, you got to pick something, right?
That reminds me of businesses. Like, when you start a business, you're conflicted with what you want to do with your business, what that vision looks like for your business. But then everybody's in your ears saying that's never going to work. This is what the market wants. This is how you have to show up in your business. So then you're like, do I pick a niche? Do I not pick a niche? Right. So it's kind of like the similar crisis, because you have the market in your ear and society, but then you have what you really want to see for yourself or your business. And so it's like trying to unpack all that and say, well, let me take a little bit of this, because you have to be able to look at both, right? Because it's a balance, like we were saying before.
Right.
So complicated.
I know. And it's just like, the areas, that I talk about in my coaching is, self, relationships, and work. Right. And it's like finding that awareness and clarity in that. And it's like, any one of those areas are out of alignment, right? What I see for myself, it really causes me to like go into a rat hole, right? Or something to spiral out of it. And it's like, and I think that's why it's important to first have this confidence in who you are, right? So how you're being. And then from that, you'll do, right? Be in the be do have, you'll do the necessary things, the appropriate things because how we're being, there's a doing to that.
Yes.
And then your doing will produce the results of that doing. And I think so often, especially in a couple of businesses that I have, because there's so many, there's so much noise around how you should do what you're doing. And it's like, it's like that piecemeal of it. And then when it doesn't work, for me in the past, it was like, I don't know what's not working. Is it me not being myself enough? Is it me listening to what they said?
Is it me being too much of myself?
Right. It's me not being myself. And so at the end of the day, where I'm landing for myself is that I'm just going to be myself. And I believe the more that I show up as myself, the more that I will get opportunities to do the things that are important to me show up in that way. And then I'll have the clients, the business, and all those things that I want. Yes, I'm listening to what's happening, but I have to keep myself in the equation. As soon as I take myself out of the equation, I believe, then I'm like everybody else.
The fulfillment is not there.
Right.
So I want to expand upon this real quick. I know we're running at the top of the hour, which is crazy.
I know.
Let's talk about that for a second, because when you say I need to be me, right? I need to be myself. I 100% agree with that. When people are not aware of what that means,
right,
they can take that of I'm being myself. I see this all the time on social media. I'm being unapologetically me. That doesn't mean that you should be a complete jerk to someone else.
Right.
Being unapologetically you is still doing no harm to others. It's about understanding yourself, being true to yourself, but not just going off and losing it on someone. That's not you. That's you not having control of your emotions and using that label of I'm being me to justify your inappropriate, uncontrolled behaviors.
Right. Yeah. I when I first started, this conversation, that's the pushback that I would get, is that I can't be myself at work because, nobody would like me.
I would be a jerk.
Right. Yeah. It was just like, it's like, and I would go, who do you think you are? I mean, it's like, do you think you're just this terrible person that just, just waiting? And I think I think you mentioned it earlier, that we're conditioned to be a certain way.
Yeah.
And in that conditioning, we lose ourselves. And we lose access to ourselves. And so that fight, I think, because I'll speak for myself here, that unapologetically myself is a fight to kind of figure out who I am. And so while I'm fighting to be myself, you're getting the brunt of it. So me being a jerk is not myself, but me fighting to get access to myself that's how it showed up. So me saying, no, I'm not going to do this, or no, it's like, but you used to like this. Oh, I never liked that. And I just did it because you like, and it's just like, no. And I think, how can we, and I love how you put, do no harm. I think that underneath everything, all of my labels, all of my insecurities, all of the things that has shown up in my life to me to cope with my life, I believe I love people on a level that I don't understand
Mm.
and I don't appreciate. And I want to get there. And so even though I'm learning new things about myself every day, and every once in a while there is something that comes up that surprises me, I think how that shows up, even if it's a little more um, edgy than I would like to show up, I still feel at the end of the day, if there's a stern no, or if there's a stern something, it's still without harm.
Mm-hmm.
I was with a coworker the other day, somebody I was working with, and he was like, "Oh, this is, this day is already a shit show." And I just looked at him and I says, "Maybe it's just the show." And he looked at me, and I was, and he was like, "What?" And I was like, "It's like sometimes the things that we call a shit show is just the show. We've signed up for this show."
Yeah.
And the more that we, and
Yeah.
us, the complaining about it and all that, it's not gonna,
Yeah, it's like a
if
self-fulfilling prophecy.
right.
You
If
look for it. Yeah.
right. And it's like, this is the show.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. It's like,
yeah, people aren't used to that. People want you to jump on their bandwagon
right.
of despair, out of control, pity. Let's all jump into the negativity bus. And isn't there like a book called something about there's something a bus, something
yeah.
bus.
Yeah. I'm trying to have, I'm
But,
sure.
but the point,
after the show,
I know what you're
to
saying, because when I was at corporate, every Monday it was like, "Hey, how was your weekend?" "Not long enough,"
right.
And then it was complain. And then
right.
Friday comes, it's like, TGIF, thank God it's Friday. And then everybody's like super happy. And it was kind of the same thing. And I kind of threw people off guard, kind of like you did.
Right.
When Monday came and I'm like, I said something positive about it, and they just had nothing to say. People get addicted to the drama and negativity.
Right.
It's sad.
I think the more that I embrace my emotional health, I'll put it that way, and my emotional intelligence, the more that I can really embrace that I can create my reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because that there's a healthy way to experience my emotions, to experience my life and how the energy of things, and it shows up in my language. But at first, it just like sometimes when I'm getting that signal of, I'm getting frustrated or I'm getting whatever, I can decide, and I think, especially in a work environment, there are so many things that we have given up
Mm-hmm.
of, because it's above our pay grade. We say things like that. They don't pay me enough to do that, right?
Right.
I've had people say they don't pay me enough to think, right? It's like, it's like, okay, how much more do I need to give you to think today, right?
Yeah.
And it's those type of things that the more that through helping people get aware of their emotions, how they're showing up, their relationships, the more I think people can have the fulfilling life that they want.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we do. And that's why I love what you're creating, because you are the more emotionally intelligent you are, the more your world, your sphere of influence becomes aware and intelligence. And that makes a difference in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it just, it's like one conversation at a time, one person at a time, one moment at a time. And I think that I got to a place of this self-awareness journey by a very traumatic place. I mean, I don't want that level of trauma on anyone, right? And I think a lot of my coaching is that I don't want to say I want to save people from trauma, because people are going to deal with what they're going to deal with.
Right.
But what I do want to do is I want people to have the tools that if trauma shows up in their life, they can show up. Who they are can show up instead of a label, a different way of showing up. Because I could easily be sitting here. I probably wouldn't be sitting here as a divorce angry person, like, and I was like steps away from that. There are a lot of people who love and care for me that accepted that reality for me, but I didn't. And the fact that I am still with my wife and we're still figuring it out, working it out together, there is hope. We get to not just grow old together, but just grow together. And I think most of our challenges, and it was showed up in my business and my work too, is that I wasn't growing. Right? We weren't growing in our marriage. She stopped. I stopped because I created what I wanted, and when that no longer fit, it had to break. It had to break down. And I think the more that I'm willing to be open to whoever shows up, but I show up, then the world is a better place. And my relationship is a better place. And the work that I do in the world is better because I chose to show up.
That's beautifully said, William. Thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you're doing. It takes an army. It takes many of us to make that difference. But like you said, one person can make such a big impact because we radiate that positive energy out into the world, and it snowballs. We get to choose. You talk about choice a lot, or you talked about choice a lot in this podcast. And I think that's something that those of you listening or watching, that's a huge takeaway, because for me, I know I got trapped in that victim mentality early on in my life, that I didn't have a choice, that things were happening to me. And I was just kind of angry at the world because of that. And once I accepted that, it changed everything. And when you realize you have that big impact, not just in your own life, but on others, not by force. That's another thing, like not trying to change others, but being that space for them. Like you said, you don't want to see people get to that spot that you were at, but everybody has to get there when they're ready. And so not forcing people, letting people come to you, but being that beacon of light for them.
Great. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so very, very much for being on the podcast as a guest. Where can people find you? And I will put all of your information that you provide also in the show notes for them.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn at William Brown. I am William Brown on Facebook. I have a Facebook page. I'm always in branding. I'm always in transition and everything. But yeah, if you reach out to me, William Brown, I am William Brown. I am William Brown 03 at Gmail. Send me a quick email, and that'll be great. It's
awesome.
It's great. And so
I'll make sure to put that in the notes so it's easy for people to access all those
Yeah, because there's so many William Browns.
I'm sure. That's why I have 4 names. People wonder why I have 4 names, because there's a lot of Brittnys.
You, right?
And there's some Brittney Connors that I don't want people to associate me with. So
Awesome. Own it, your name, right? Your name, right?
Yeah.
Got it.
Thank you so much, William. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been great.